Well, our good friend is in studio here, 9:05 on a Monday morning, 8 days to go until the election. Scott Faughn, the publisher of the Missouri Times, doing his F-150 tour around the state. So for people that don't know, what is this F-150 tour you do before the elections?
So before the primary and the general, every cycle, we get in the truck and drive around to every competitive race in the state. We started in eastern Jackson County because Kansas City is the political epicenter of Missouri politics in this general election. The most competitive races, the tightest races are right here in Kansas City. So that's where we kicked it off. Pardon me, we'll hit St. Louis. We'll hit the southeast Missouri, the Lead Belt, Missouri's Rhineland. We'll go down to southwest Missouri. We'll get to Neosho. If there's a competitive race in this state, we'll be there. I like to go on the ground and buy a beer. I like to talk to some regular folks and see kind of what they're saying, what they're hearing about politics. You get a very different view. Then interviewing a candidate, like we went to Independence, interviewed Robbie Sauls and Joe Nicola. I got to talk to them and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? How's that going? And I'll tell you one thing I could see. You know, Kansas City, this is where the difference will be made in state politics, the direction and the momentum. Robbie Sauls, the Democrat, there's this trick I've learned. If I see you in May and you haven't lost any weight and you're not any more tan, when I see you in September and October, you're probably not doing your doors, you're going to lose. I'll just tell you, Republicans, listen to me. Robbie Sauls is 20 pounds lighter. That dude has been doing his doors.
So he's hustling.
Hey, you could just tell. You could just tell.
Yeah, you can tell.
You can't fake it.
So what are you seeing? We talked just briefly off the air about early voting, and obviously Republicans, up until it seems like this cycle, were like, no, we're going to show up on Election Day. And listen, I was guilty of that as well. Hey, Election Day is my day. I'm going to go out and vote. I voted last week early for the first time ever. Do you get the sense that Missourians, especially Republicans, are now open to early voting and they're taking advantage of it?
I think the folks are. I'll be honest with you. I think that not embracing early voting was a tactical mistake by the Republican Party nationally and here in Missouri. Republicans fought this, but I'll just tell you, let's assume we're running a business now because politics can get so emotional. Mm-hmm. You have voters that are, the majority of the Republican base is older, very stable. They live in the same house for several cycles in a row. They are open to a logical message. We can organize them. The Republican Party's funding is normally not the Republican Party's problem. Organization, frankly, we're more organized than the Democrats. To me, organization and funding means if we embrace early voting, I don't think the party has fully embraced it yet. I think the Republican voters have, and I'll tell you where I think it's the biggest difference in these swing districts. The truth is early voting changed things in rural Missouri a little bit, but a 20-minute wait, if you're working a job and you got kids and you got responsibilities and you volunteer at the church, finding 20 minutes on Election Day you can usually do. Yeah. But in a lot of suburban places, the wait's 2 hours long, and I'm sorry. I'm from rural Missouri. Most of my advocacy probably is going to be for rural Missouri. It is not right to have people in the suburban areas of this state who have to wait 2 hours to vote, or the urban areas for that matter. You're disenfranchising working people. If you go break this down, and now there's apps that can tell you how long the waits are, at least in St. Louis there, I know. If you're a St. Louisan and you're working, you're raising a family, you have volunteer obligations, you're busy, that person's probably a Republican, and that person absolutely has no ability to sit in line for 2 hours. But if you give them, say, give me 30 minutes over the course of 2 weeks, they probably show up, and they go remind them. Mm-hmm. I think there's a big undervote of folks on the Republican side that you can turn out to vote.
That is fascinating when you think about it. So what does it mean for Missouri when it comes to this political cycle? Let's start at the top with Mike Kehoe.
I think Mike Kehoe is going to win. I think any Republican was going to win these statewide races. I think Crystal Quaid is a tremendous candidate, if you want the truth. I think she's competent. We would disagree with a lot of her decisions, but they would not be goofy. Crystal Quaid's a good candidate, but no one was going to beat Mike Kehoe.
Yeah.
There might have been the right storm if it had been one of the other two Republicans that this race gets close. Frankly, Mike Kehoe is not just liked in this state, he's beloved.
Yeah. So then what about the Senate race with Josh Hawley? Some may suggest that one might be closer just because Hawley's more of a polarizing figure. Do you see that happening or no?
Look, I think there's people that there's reasonable critiques of Josh Hawley, just like there are any politician in office. Mm-hmm. I just don't think Lucas Kunz is the right person to point them out. I mean, if you were going to run against Josh Hawley, you might hit him on maybe not being the most genuine guy. It's not about the fist pump in front of the protest. It's the running away. If you were going to say, well, you don't come to Missouri enough, or you went to Yale. I mean, though Lucas Kunz does not come off all that genuine either, frankly. And Lucas Kunz went to Yale, and I don't know that the person that could take advantage of an attack on Josh Hawley was him. Also, I'll just tell you, Josh Hawley's an excellent politician. You were not going to beat Josh Hawley no matter who ran against him. Do I think Lucas Kunz was the best set to beat him? No, I don't. I don't think he will. I don't think it'll be particularly close. And that's really a testament to Josh Hawley is popular in the state of Missouri.
What about Lucas Kunz shooting that reporter in the arm last week up here in Holt? How about that?
Best day of his campaign, right? I mean, that was the best. We've all been shooting too close to a metal target and shot a buddy. He had one of his PR team there, a.k.a. the journalist, and shot him in the arm. The only part I thought was dumb is he was like putting a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
He should have handed him some dirt to rub on it. That would have been way better. I think that it's really hard to run as a Democrat because the Republicans are like, yeah, I shot him. He was asking for it.
Yeah.
But the Democrats got to go put a Band-Aid on it and stuff. Look, I think Lucas Kunz is obviously a talented guy. He's 10 on 10 on fundraising. I think that, honestly, everybody has a good matchup, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you run for office, you're like, you know what? I stack up well. It's like a fighter. I stack up great against this opponent. I don't think Lucas Kunz stacks up well against Josh Hawley.
Well, he's now going to have two straight cycles where he lost a primary 2 years ago to Trudy Bush Valentine. Now he's most likely to lose here in a couple of weeks. What's the place for a guy like him, or really any Democrat, because they're not going to win anything most likely statewide in the state of Missouri right now?
You've got to have a runway. I mean, I think if you take Crystal Quaid, for example, she's going to, if she does a little better than Nicole Galloway, which I think is possible with Amendment 3 on the ballot, she then becomes a top candidate to be a state senator. She goes in the state senate for 8 years. The one thing that's a fact about politics is we change. These states change. Who would have thought we'd be talking about Michigan voting Republican? And the world changes. Missouri was not always bright red Republican. Frankly, it was bright blue Democrat for the vast majority of the state's history. Even my lifetime, now I'm 40, 20 years of this state was dominated by supermajorities of Democrats, and the last 20 was a transition, and now it's supermajority Republican. That pendulum will swing. You give a person like Crystal Quaid 8 years with some statewide name ID, with a profile of donors, that's the future. Lucas Kunz, I think if he wants to be in elected politics, he should probably pick a state legislative seat that he can win and go do the hard work. These people that come in and kind of cut at the front of the line, they don't have the appeal and the friendship and the relationships on the ground that others do. But that's common sense. You know, they're jumping in on a fundraising thing.
Was it the fault of former Governor Jay Nixon that this party seemingly had no bench statewide? Or is it really just the Trump phenomenon and the way the party shifted the last 10 years?
I think that there's a big boardroom in Washington, and they decide we can win the presidency, we can win the United States House of Representatives, and maybe the Senate if we focus our messaging on these demographics of people. And frankly, those demographics of people do not exist in the state of Missouri. Therefore, they've invested nothing in the state of Missouri. When the world changes, as the world changes, as the world turns, if you're old enough like me and your mom used to watch soap operas, you will see that as time goes by, we will match up the demographics of a competitive voter again, and they'll invest money here. The National Party decided that Missouri was not important, and the demographic of the people in Missouri did not offer them an opportunity to market to them and to be important enough to compete, and so they don't. They just don't.
Scott Faughn is here, Missouri Times. He's on his F-150 tour, 8 days to go until the election. We'll take a quick break and come back with him. Amendment 3, Amendment 2, and much more to get into here on KCMO. Scott Faughn is here, Missouri Times publisher, doing his F-150 tour around the state as we head down the home stretch of the election. A lot of ballot initiatives, of course, you're going to be voting on here in Missouri. The big one, or one of the big ones, Amendment 3 on abortion. Scott, the belief is that this thing is going to pass, which would bring abortion back to Missouri. How close do you think it is right now?
You know, I would have told you a month ago it wasn't that close at all. However, I do think, it's the religious community in Missouri that has stepped up. I think the margin is tightening. I think it is possible that it goes down. If I still had to guess ride or die, I would say that it passes. But I've watched, pardon me, the institutional part of the pro-life community is just in shambles. I mean, honestly,
that's the right to life groups, the pro-life groups.
Yeah,
yep.
You got a guy like Sam Lee that's very reasonable and liked, but in the Capitol, the only thing the pro-life folks hate more than abortion is other pro-lifers. I mean, they
don't like competition.
I think Missouri Right to Life, after abortion was banned, They decided they wanted to write the congressional map. They wanted to, Medicaid now has to be. They made everything about abortion, and I think it undercut their message of of the seriousness of the issue. Honestly, you just look around. If you drive through Missouri, you're going to see no on 3 signs. There's like 3 or 4 different ones because all these groups hate each other and they can't coordinate even on a yard sign. They can't agree on a yard sign. I listen to KCMO multiple times a week. I've heard no advertising telling people to get out and vote against Amendment 3. I would assume the KCMO audience is open to a pro-life message. I've not heard it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Now, if somehow they beat this thing, they're bulletproof tigers, and this chaos worked, and I'll be the first person to tip my hat. I think the Right to Life is still the biggest endorsement in politics. But there's going to have to be somebody sit back and look. I mean, take the 17th up in Clay County. Jerry Nolte, that seat was going to be Democrat. It is a seat. Lauren Arthur held it. It should be Democrat. You get a guy like Jerry Nolte that's filed, all of a sudden it's competitive. But Jerry Nolte, who I've always known to be pro-life, I have no reason to think otherwise, he's not the guy that's going to be screaming in your face about it. Jerry Nolte's the guy that could actually convince someone to become pro-life. I've never seen screaming work. And I think the Right to Life folks are going to have to realize you have to go back to convincing people. Just being able to out-scream folks is not an effective strategy.
No, it's not. And I am having trouble. I hear from a lot of people in different groups, but it doesn't seem like there's any top-down coordination.
There's none.
On the vote no side. And there's a ton of vote yes ads, and they're running all over the state, all over Kansas City. And they're coordinated.
On the same page, all working together, sharing information. Look, tip your hat to the other side. I mean, it's like when the other pitcher throws a shutout, you can blame your bats, but also tip your hat to the other side. The pro-choice community has organized behind this very effectively. I think there's messages that could go against this. In my opinion, where your average Missourian is, that doesn't talk about abortion at dinner, like as a normal person, they are pro-life, but they think maybe the current law is a little extremely pro-life. They'd prefer, something a little more moderate. But this law goes, I think, too far the other way.
Yeah.
But I think that nobody's going to read. I have never read every part of a ballot in my life, and I do this professionally.
Yep.
I'm going to kind of get a gist for it and make a decision. I think when people do that top line gist and be like, that law currently is a little much. But now 2 years from now, I think we'll be sitting right here talking in this studio about, okay, now that's the pro-life amendment that's out to overturn this one. When they turned it back over to the states, it was going to be messy for a while. And in Missouri, and I had to guess Kansas too, this fight is not over. Mm-hmm. It's going to continue to be messy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So now Amendment 2 is the sports betting bill, and a lot of folks obviously want to see sports betting come to Missouri. We know that people go across the state line here to Kansas. They go back, they buy their weed in Missouri. It's kind of a weird setup here right now that we've got. But it feels like that should pass. But the whole thing about funding the schools, I just feel like that's kind of losing its luster. Everyone feels like the schools have enough money. Just ask people if they want to be able to place a sports bet. What am I missing about the language?
I think you hit on the nail right on the head. I think they made it too complicated. I think they think they fell into a trap of running a campaign from 20 years ago when funding schools was a big deal. Mm-hmm. I think post-COVID, it's like the last highway tax. The Highway Patrol, when they did the polls on it after, they said, well, we didn't like the Highway Patrol part because we think you're going to divert money around. And they made it too complicated. I think that if we do the postmortem on the sports betting campaign, number one, it would have passed even with this campaign about the schools, except for Caesar's Palace coming in and trying to nuke it. I voted for it. I think that it's bizarre to me to hear all these liberty and freedom people prining on, but then they want to tell you can't bet on the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's my liberty and freedom if I want to bet on the Chiefs. It's so funny. Most of the liberty and freedom people only want the liberties and freedoms they want you to have. Then they want the government to outlaw the rest of them. But no, I think Caesars just came in. I honestly don't care where the money goes. I want to be able to lay a bet on Mizzou.
Well, that's where I think most people are at. They don't care. They don't think about it. It's inconsequential to whether or not they want to place a bet. They're not going to not place a bet on Mizzou because, I don't want my money to go to that organization or this school. It's irrelevant.
I think finally I saw some ads with Ozzie Smith.
Yeah.
I always thought the campaign was simple. You get Adam Wainwright, Ozzie Smith over in St. Louis. You get Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce in Kansas City. They're on television shaking hands saying, vote for this. I'm a very simple hillbilly. If Ozzie Smith tells me to vote for something, I'm voting for it. If Patrick Mahomes told my son to bug me to vote for this, my son would get his Mahomes jersey on and be like, Dad, you got to vote for this. I think they overthought it to a certain extent, and maybe they just assumed all the guys like us were voting for it, so let's go try to bring in somebody that's not. That could have been the strategy, but I think their best ads have been the one, like they debuted the Ozzie Smith ad. I think it's pretty great. See what George Brett's up to today.
Well, I was going to say, the problem is, though, they're doing the Ozzie Smith ad on this side of the state, too, which you couldn't find George Brett.
Oh,
yeah.
See,
it's running like crazy.
Well, my question for you, Pete, is if George Brett calls up and says, hey, could I come in on Friday and talk sports betting? Something tells me that you make a little time for George Brett.
I absolutely would make time for George Brett. I reached out to him a couple weeks ago during the Royals run and unfortunately did not hear back, but maybe your pitch will help me now.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you're the Royals and you want sports betting and you're a small market team and you want this cash influx,
get your people out there.
I just kind of don't understand why you don't have your guns out saying do this, because obviously it would be like a Don Dinkinger ad in St. Louis. It would not go well to have a Royals player there any more than it would a Cardinals player here.
So on that note, how much do you think that Amendment 2 passing helps especially the Royals, but really both teams, stay in the state of Missouri, or is that more contingent on Kehoe getting in there?
You know, I think the Royals Stadium has not been handled well. I don't think that's a minority opinion. I love a downtown ballpark. I've not seen. I'm kind of like your Jackson County voter here. I've not seen a plan that there's enough acreage to put a ballpark in downtown. If there was, I think that'd be awesome. Mm-hmm. I've not seen that. I think there's a spot in the Northland that you can see downtown from that makes just a whole lot of sense to put a sports complex. If I had to guess, maybe it trends that way. Do I think that the sports gambling is enough to decide where you're going to put the team? Because you could get that revenue wherever at some point you're going to get that revenue. But is it enough to sign another starting pitcher? Yeah, I think it's that kind of money. It's probably not relocation money, but I think it's, do you sign a starter money? Yeah, I do.
And now Kehoe gets in there. He's obviously very much keeping these teams here. What do you see him doing? What will the state do? I know Parson wants this thing done as well as a big Chiefs guy. He does not want to have the Chiefs leaving on his resume.
I think what you're going to find is probably the voters are going to tell the tale here. My read, and I can't claim that I can fill this, but from what I ascertained, the people of this community do not want to see their Chiefs leave Missouri. They want to see them stay right there. I was actually told something. The design of Arrowhead was done before the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that lower bowl is so steep, it's what helps hold that sound in. Mm-hmm. And if you build a new stadium, you can't put it back like that. You have to build it with the wider concourse. I think there's some reasons why they want to stay at Arrowhead. I would hate to see them leave Arrowhead, all the memories everyone has. Something tells me in my white trash intuition, the voters of this county and Jackson County pass something to keep the Chiefs here, and the Royals move, whether it's just over the state line or to the Northland. I would bet you that that's where they end up. As far as state money, they probably are going to want to say we spent no state money, but just as with Busch Stadium, they'll do the transportation on-ramps, off-ramps. They'll do the stormwater stuff. There is state money that can go into a major Eco Devo project that probably will. And Kehoe's the type of guy. Kehoe's good. He's got a sharp pencil. If somebody can sit down as a businessman and pull these groups together and figure it out, it's Kehoe. But I've heard that they're kind of trying to narrow these things down to a Kansas choice and a Missouri choice by December 1st. However, nothing on this whole project has went to time frame.
Yeah,
so I'm sure that won't either.
I've got less than a minute. Where are you going after this? What's the plan?
Going to see Jerry Nolte.
Oh, very cool.
You know, I tell you what, I think Maggie Nuremberg was going to hold that seat with no doubt. Then Jerry Nolte filed. I think there's a sizable number of Clay County folks that may not vote for a lot of Republicans, but they'll vote for Jerry. It was the best recruit of the cycle over here. He's made this a race. Look, the Democrats should still hold it. Maggie Nuremberg's a great candidate, but Jerry Nolte's got a real chance to steal a seat.
Good stuff. Scott Faughn, thank you, my man.
Thank you.
Find him at the Missouri Times. He's on social media. The F-150 tour is off and running, starting right here in the Kansas City area. Caller of the day and more is coming up next on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.